Welcome to yet another episode of Pivotal Change. I am your host, Ryan Conn from CS Business Consulting and Shelton Associates CPA, and we have a very fun episode tonight with an all-star lineup. We're going to start off with one very dear friend of mine, Rob Estes. He is a former police detective, police training officer responsible for my development and training while I was in law enforcement, and he is the current director of emergency management in the entire McCracken County, Kentucky. And you've seen him before when we talked about some of the governmental operations and things that go into the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. But now he's back to talk a little bit more about mentorship, about training and developing people, because he was responsible for a lot of what you see on this show today. So, Rob, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Ryan.
Oh, man. So we have probably a million stories to tell, but I'm hoping to maybe tell one or two reference points about our stories and really dive into mentorship. So the first thing I'd like the audience to hear is I always want them to understand definitions and hopefully watch the show with a pen and paper. Tell us about, what does mentorship mean to you? Kind of your definition of mentorship, and what does it look like from your past experiences?
Well, I was lucky throughout all phases of my career and through my life. I've had very good mentors. Back when I started at the police department, I had very good field training officers. They became mentors until this day. When I left and I went into the drug division, to firearms, I've had a very good mentor that I've depended on over the years. It all started off with a mutual respect, started off with mutual trust, but it's been a professional friendship. There's been boundaries there with each one of them. And after seeing what an advantage that was to my career, I've always tried to be a mentor. When I started getting into leadership, I really try to mentor, those that are around me. My mentors pushed me into making decisions when I didn't want to make decisions. They counseled me on the right decisions. We talked about professional ethics. Their goal was for me to do their job at the end of the day. They were secure enough in their talent and their job to be able to train me that way and give me the tools to take their place. Not any jealousy, but a constant encouragement on me to be able to do their job.
I like that a lot. And I really want to draw out a major component of mentorship that you've been hitting on just now, is that you said they're training me to do their jobs. And specifically in the law enforcement realm, you were training your future backup officer. You were training your future teammate on a special assignment, your future partner on an undercover investigation, a person who you may very well rely on for your life or in some of the most critical situations you can run into. And you said towards the beginning of your response about building mutual respect and mutual trust. So for me, I know that the rookie law enforcement officer, I was the knucklehead rookie at some point. I knew I could not perform every single part of the job as demanded of me. So how does a person that is the mentor get those moments of trust where, hey, I need to put them in this situation. I know they can't truly handle it on their own, but I'm here to save them and bail them out if it really gets bad. What is the dynamics of putting somebody in a situation?
I think it comes down to the time you spend together. You have that building that trust, building that time together is where you can see what they're capable of. It's the observation of the person that you're mentoring. It's observing them and letting them get to the position where they're comfortable and teaching them to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because leadership is uncomfortable. It's not fun for the most part. It's about being able to make the decisions nobody else wants to make. And thinking back, like keep talking about law enforcement, but thinking back on my field training, that was his key that he did. Always put me in a bad situation, or not a bad situation, but an uncomfortable situation where I had to make those decisions. And I would get to the point where I was stuck. You're stumbling and you're fumbling and you're not sure of yourself. And he would just slowly interject, key phrases, key words, and push me along and just, I wouldn't say push, I would say he pulled me through it and you learn more that way. I just learned so much because I mean, I'm talking about this is 1994 that I'm talking, and 30 years ago, I'm sitting there thinking, and I can picture the time of day, everything around me, the location we were, and this guy, doing this for me. And afterward, it was a critique of what we did, and I learned so much just for that. I still do today. I still respect him so wholly today.
Yeah. So what you did also clearly carried down in legacy because you did those same things to me. And there's a phrase that you taught me in law enforcement, and I can only suppose that you learned it from somebody else in law enforcement, was fail forward. And it was take your failures or your little mistakes and stuff like that and learn something and apply it forward in the future to one, avoid the same mistake or the same learning situation and possibly enhance something else related to the failure that you learned. And I think that's really important that the mentor make people uncomfortable. You said the other very common phrase, which is get comfortable being uncomfortable. And there was growth in discomfort. And I can remember you putting me in some situations where I was uncomfortable, whether it was just skill development, like on the range or in a scenario. But if I knew, especially in a training circumstance, that I could handle something very uncomfortable and make my mistake in the training, I would then be successful out on the street. So apply this to us in some team building and some business or entrepreneur leadership style here. If you're working in a business, what opportunities or systems, let's ask that question, what systems could somebody put in place to challenge themselves to develop this mentorship in their employees and their staff or their just new recruits?
Sure, I think it comes down to when you're looking into a program like that. I think that you must continue. You got to evaluate it. The needs assessment. You come in to see who needs what, and who can give what. Who's your mentor? Who needs the truth? And you evaluate that. Not everybody can be a good mentor. And we know that. I mean, you and I could sit here and have a whole segment on poor leadership, and what poor leadership can do, not just you as an individual, but to your entire team. And but you find a good mentor, and then you find out you place him with the right people, and putting them together is a challenge. And then when you go into training, I think it's really be successful today. You have to have a sense of training, continuous training, and not just that quote unquote training we have to have, the training to get your certification, that training that nobody really pays enough attention to. I think it's the quality of your training is the quality of the type of person you're going to have. That being said, we've had to have those courses, and you remember those courses have to have, and they were going to be just so boring. But then you were given a dynamic instructor, and that instructor made that. I'll never forget that I had a class that was going to be given by an attorney on the Fourth Amendment, and I was dreading this. We've all had those classes, and so I got in there I was a hostage. I had to be there. That's the way I was. I was a hostage in the class, and so I go to the class and have this guy who comes out is such a dynamic figure. I've learned so much from him because he brought the passion and taught that class so well. It was very good. So the quality of your training set up, it has to be there. It's not just what you find something that's cheap on the internet to give your people, but to give people quality training that they learn from and that they can use, put in their toolbox every day.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So I heard you say one, I was thinking about the systems and stuff like that, but you really made a great point. You said even before the system goes in place, you have to identify the needs and then identify the good mentors, because not necessarily just somebody that has a high skill set or is good at the job can automatically be plugged in and be a good mentor and teacher. You have to have that dynamic teacher that has that skill set and that leadership as well. And the highest performer does not equal best leader and teacher. And I think that is a common mistake that we see in all capacities, law enforcement, corporate world, even things like churches and community organizations. So that's a really good note that you said. And I think I remember also, being held hostage in some of those training classes. That's probably a pretty decent way to put it. But we had a series of core competencies that we used to have. And officers were broken up into 4 phases of training. And these 12, I think it was 12, it could have been 14, 12 core competencies were monitored on a checklist format, and they were checked off that you engaged and demonstrated each one of these 12 competencies across the 4 phases of training. And the 4 phases were developmental, and they would try to push you along the way. So we have just a couple of seconds before we have to cut into break, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about core competencies and the systems. But Rob, a real quick trick on what's the first place somebody should start when developing a needs assessment for the list of core competencies that they might want?
I think the first thing you have to identify as your goals is what you want to get out of this training. What we set our needs. What do we need to be trained on, and what are our goals for this training? What do we want to come out of it? I think that's the very first thing that you have to get in there is you have to identify your goals, list your goals out, what's your expectation, and what are you going to get from it? What are you going to get as the leader by having your people go through this training?
I like that a lot. Good. So that's a perfect place for us to put the bookmark in, and we're going to open this journey back up after this commercial break. So everybody else, you sit right there, stay tuned, and we'll be right back with more Rob Estes on Pivotal. We are back from the break on Pivotal Change, and we are continuing our conversation with Rob Estes. We've been talking a lot about mentorship and the development of people, identifying needs, and identifying the right type of leader, teacher, trainer, instructor to carry out a mentorship program. So we're going to dive a little bit more into the details, and then we're going to talk about some mindset that also goes into mentorship and training people. So coming back from the break, Rob, I got the first question for you. We talked about some core competencies and some training along phases, and you really mentioned the first step is identifying the right people. What are some ways that people can track, document, and kind of organize the training system that they're trying to implement? What have you seen successful in your law enforcement background, and now as the director of emergency management, dozens and dozens of people having gone through this under your leadership?
Being accredited at the police department, we had to document everything. Our accreditations, when we would have an audit, I may have somebody come up to me and say, okay, Ryan Conn went through driver's training in the spring of 2008. I need to see his paperwork. And I had to document everything, the weather conditions, everything, what you went through, the entire event that you went through, all the training you did, and I had to document how you did, your evaluation of how you did. And so the documentation and how you keep up with that is you have to have that. That does not, the liability, of course, is that's one of those things that you can save yourself from a liability point, say that you have trained some. But also, I could go back into all of those training systems and I would look. In the police department, I had, we had different programs that we could use to keep up with that. And I was able to keep up with some of that that way and look back and say, hey, Ryan Conn, didn't perform well on the precision driving at the drive. So I look back and I would see somebody else. And I could, look back at my training and see that we didn't perform well. Or I could go back and say, and look during the year that it's been since then, and I could say, holy cow, we've had 11 at-fault collisions, since then, and our collisions have went down, but they need to go down more. And so, having that documentation that you can go back and reference, and look and see what was my goal. My goal for drivers is to make you safer so that you go home. It's also to make the public safe. It's also to keep our costs down. So we would go through our driver's training thinking that, then evaluate, here, did it work? Did what we used? Do you remember today the things that we said during driver's training. So, documenting that, starting your training from the simplistic to the complex. I believe day 2 or day 3 of you being on the police department, we started talking about the simple to the complex, and doing our training that way and documenting.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's a great example as well. And for the audience watching at home, that was a hypothetical scenario.
That is true. Ryan is an excellent driver. It was very hot.
The only person that would disagree is probably my wife. But other than that, everyone thinks I'm so yeah, that's a great example. And I really like how you are coaching us to say, hey, document everything, right? Because it's not only tracking and a way for you to look back and say, what do they need next? What do they need next? But in that default negative scenario, hey, we've documented, we've tried to train this person, we've done these things. I think everybody's run into the example of a toxic employee or somebody that just is not working out for some type of reason. And if you don't have a trail of documentation, one, what you tried to do to improve this person as a positive, genuine leader, and two, what wasn't working along the way, then it's going to be hard to justify to whatever venue may be challenging you as why you terminated or had a separation with this employee, this team member. So I think those are good points. And the simple to complex is very good. We say crawl, walk, run a lot. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. And so you got to onboard, give definitions, mindset, expectations, introduce to the easy stuff, get to the hard stuff. And before the end, you're doing things like active shooter training, which is really more of a sprint than anything. Yes. But I think people always try to jump to the run or jump to the sprint. So I appreciate you emphasizing that. So in training, not just skill development, like driver's training, and I know that's staying in between the cones, but not just the skill development, how do you as a mentor now start conditioning people for mindset to think and process and persevere in the right categories? Those seem to be a little softer or character traits, and we both know harder to train. Well, what does an expert like you do to put people in that engagement?
Mindset comes from explaining why you're having training. Why are we having this training? And to emphasize the importance of the training. If I start off and I'm going to tell my people, well, we've got to do this training. This is the way it's got to be. It's not going to go very. It's not. Nobody's going to be excited about it. But if I go out onto the range and say, if you came out here to goof off today, then you've come to the wrong place, because what we're going to learn about today is that I'm going to keep you alive, and you're going to keep me alive. And if you don't think enough about yourself to keep you alive, then you're going to think enough about you. And and I would, I might have been a little more dynamic with that on range, but it was very important. I wanted to get that point across. I wanted to sit there and drill it to everybody's head. I repeated phrases over to put them, give you that mindset, because the final weapon that we have is the mind. It is the most important weapon you'll ever have. As I leave law enforcement and get out there to the corporate world and coming back to emergency management, it is that it's motivating my people to let them know how important this training may be, and how this training affects them on a daily basis, and how this training makes them better. And if I can make them better, then that's how our training goes, from the simple as my training grows, or as my team grows, so does training. And you can remember the first time you went to the range to the last you were on the range, and there for a period we didn't have a big hiring, and we were able to have a group of people that have been through a lot of training on the range, and our training was we were doing some extremely high speed stuff that you would only teach in an advanced shooters course, and we were teaching our entire on the police department. And I would like to say that that's the reason that we were so safe during that period of time, was not just because you had the skills, was because you had the mindset, and the mindset going in. If you look like food, you'll get eaten, and we didn't look like food. That was the difference.
I love that example so much. I mean, we had a good time, and you used to bring up a question that you would always ask, and it'd usually come into the break or a time when we're reloading, and we'd say, "Hey guys, who's the best shot on the range?" And you might have two of the more confident or three of the more confident people out of a group of 8 or 10 or 12, kind of raise their hand. "Oh yeah, it's me, it's me." And then you would always scold the entire class, saying, every single one of you should be out here with the right mindset, saying, "I'm the best shot," because your life may very well depend on you being the best shot. And that's a mindset that carried with me and many others off the range. Who's the best police officer out here? Who's the best report writer? Okay, who's the best accountant? Who's the best wrestling coach? Who's the best father? Well, it better be you, because your children depend on it, your athletes depend on it, your staff, your clients depend on it. So there's a healthy mindset that comes from the training you provided, saying, "Hey, we're out here in law enforcement, firearms training. That's the moment that you're absolutely playing for keeps. Should the worst case scenario ever happen, and you've got to have a mind condition." And even though most industries are not life and death, there's a mindset of, "Hey, I'm playing for keeps. I'm playing for someone else's money. I'm playing for somebody else's livelihood, somebody else's ability to support their family." And we need to have that mindset with all the decisions that we make. I think that you're really highlighting an area that's important here. Well, let me fling one more question over to you before we kind of have to wrap up the show and cut to one of our other guests. But when you have these processes in place and you have people that have developed a mindset and you have created an ensemble of a team that can now do advanced things, what is your expert mindset onto one? Hold on to that capacity that you've developed and get those people now to become the next generation of mentors. What's that handover process or moment look like to you?
I think that's that's what our goal is. I mean, that's what every one of our goals as leaders. We want to get to that point where you can turn the reins over. I think that comes from a reverse mentorship. If I'm mentoring and I'm bringing it up to that, I've got to be able to reverse mentor as well. My chief deputy right now, she's younger than me. I am not. I am not into technology like she is. So we have a reverse mentorship going that way. There comes to that point where you want to get them to that point, right? To the point where you give them the challenge, the everyday challenge to, like we were talking about earlier, to do your job. Give them the everyday challenge to do the job that's in front of whoever, whatever it may be, to put them in a position of leadership, let them do that. Then you can turn that around, and once they're comfortable, we would always talk about starting off with any drill or anything that we do in policing. We start off as being confused and work it all the way to the point they're comfortable. Then when you put them in a position of mentorship and they start leading people, well, then they become convinced that they are leaders, that they are the mentor of the future, that they can pass their information, their knowledge down to the next generation, and they see what worked and they apply that to their lives, see what didn't work.
Well, let me jump in here, Rob, because that's a perfect place for us to end this segment. Is that how you are training from the beginning? I'm not just teaching you this basic skill, but one day you're going to have to lead somebody else in this area and passing that torch, so to speak. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you and your brain and understand mentorship better, how would somebody find you or get a hold of
you? On Facebook, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I have to think of that because that's my chief deputy. All those. It's the McCracken County in McCracken County, Kentucky.
That is awesome. Well, Rob, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I appreciate it, and I'm certain we're going to see more of you in the future. And everyone else watching the show, you sit tight. We're going to be back yet again with a new guest on this episode of Pivotal Change. Thank you for sticking with us through the break. We're going to keep moving on with our next guest. We had a great conversation about mindset and mentorship and tracking all of that growth. And now we're going to take that same idea of mentorship and mindset and change, and we're going to talk with Brittany Casarez. She is the firm director, and she has some incredible experience on managing and leading and mentoring through change. So, Brittany, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I'm excited.
Yep, I'm glad to have you back. And you know me, I like to jump right into things. And one of the things that I want to know, because I'm fairly familiar with your firm journey is that you and Ernie made a decision several years ago to go from what we refer to as the traditional tax factory, just cranking out tax returns and sprinkling some advice into people's situation, to wholeheartedly embracing the relationship and the advisory mindset. So I want to know, my question is, what was kind of the breakthrough point, the mental moment where you just said, hey, now's the time for change, something's got to change, and this is.
Yeah, I think the breakthrough moment was essentially for Ernie, the owner, or the partners of the firm, basically just being mentally exhausted of being providing their expertise for free. And so, how are we going to change the model to actually utilize the expertise over 30 plus years and actually get paid for that, and actually produce a business that removes the scope creep and removes the enabling of clients to really understand the value in the relationship that we could provide to them. So mentally, that was where it hit. I'm providing free experience, and we got to make a change.
Gotcha. So back when that occurred, I remember the conversations right after the change with Ernie and with you about how your mindset was like, we have something of value. We're extremely good at what we do. We have the service that we can offer, and it's just not being pushed back in a reciprocal way from the client. So we need to change maybe the client base and, of course, how we interact with the client so that we can truly bring out the value that we have to offer for people. And I think that was really transformational, and I enjoyed watching you go through that. So after you had that mindset change, help us discuss with the audience, what were the first steps, and kind of just like how you identify our first steps in implementing this change are. And then I also want to know, what was the process you went through to identify your first steps?
Yeah, I think honestly, Ryan, the biggest first step that we have learned is you have to have a go all in. You have to adopt your entire mindset to either go all in or not do it at all. We experienced many firms that we followed or spoke to who kind of went step by step, put their foot in the water, tested it out, and then gradually went into it. Well, in those terms, you go back to old habits. You go back to what is comfortable. So our biggest thing within our firm is we're going to go head first, and we're going to change our entire model. And we know the backlash is going to come, but we had to find ways to prepare for that backlash. And what were those baby steps going to be? And the first step that we figured what would be is, let's not utilize this new process towards our legacy clients because they are in that comfortable zone, but let's build our entire model around anything new, any business, any new conversation is going to be first into this new model that we want to create. And to be honest, it was kind of trial and error, right? They didn't know, those new individuals didn't know what our old model was. So it was time to kind of play some cards and see how they were taken, if they were winning hands or not. And then we kind of went back to the drawing board and took them step by step of, well, this was productive, this was not productive. And then we just changed it for the next scenario or the next conversation. And I think that was our biggest learning point. We really didn't have a game plan of, a written model of how we were going to do it. Let's just test the waters, see how well we know our own expertise, because this is why we're doing what we're doing. So let's just talk as human to human, and how we can build that relationship and see how it goes. It was actually very successful.
I think the points you're making are very important, is that you don't always have to have a perfect written plan that you go execute on. Sometimes you need that moment where we're just going to draw a line in the sand and say, from this point forward, we are doing this. We understand that there's going to be some weight left behind us, and we're going to have to deal with those waves at some point, but we're going to move this part forward. And just like anybody knows, the new client has no idea what the old tax factory model was like for you. This is how we do business now, and we're able to move forward with a clean slate. And then I know that you had success transitioning over some legacy clients as well, but that's probably not the point I'm going to touch on next. What I want to do is, from that line in the sand and from winning those hands of cards, as you put your metaphor, how did you then start tracking your process of what was a win? We are providing value and receiving value. And then how did you keep those moving forward from going back to those comfortable moments that we were up against?
I think we just kept riding out the high. So whatever the wins were, we just kept writing those out and celebrating those wins, which then produced a very positive mental attitude, the PMA, of going into tracking the next one. So every little bit of confidence that we had from one little win only helped us build out to the next one. And how we tracked it was we kind of, used our project management system. And in that system, we created the best notes we possibly could. What worked and what didn't work. And the things that didn't work, they were pretty eye-glaring immediately that they were not going to work. It wasn't one of those where it was kind of weigh the options. So what didn't work, we just scrapped immediately. We didn't even think twice of, oh, it's not going to work with this individual or the client. It just wasn't going to work for our firm. So we immediately scratched it and we didn't bring it back into the twofold. So I think that was where we started. A lot of documenting, but at the same time, it was more or less just building our confidence. Because once our confidence was there, the processes started to become a lot easier to build out and write, because we could speak to it as well as write it. So that's kind of where we started. We kind of went backward of how it should have been, but it was successful for our firm, and I think we had the ability because we were small enough, and we mainly took one person, my position in this case, of actually seeing it through from beginning to end.
Right.
It wasn't too many cooks in the kitchen. We didn't have too many people's hand in the pot. We stuck it down to myself and the owner, and we were the ones who really tried to get it off the ground in front.
I love that. You just loaded us up with a ton of information. I hope anybody watching this is taking notes. But yeah, I'm going to disagree with you on one thing. I don't think you did it backwards. I think you did it a very natural way. You had the base of the system built with an accounting firm. It's the same thing we went through, the same thing that a lot of people go through in all kinds of industries. And then you had a vision. I know what your vision was because we talked about it over the years. And then as you continue to execute it towards that vision, you're stripping what doesn't work and you're adding what does, and you're building the perfect plan along the way. And I think that's the way most people work. Even as a wrestling coach, I have a wrestler that's new to wrestling. Well, that is going to be very confusing and awkward for the very first period of time. There is no written plan for that person other than let's develop basic skill sets. And then after year one, or maybe they have some quick success, say, hey, here's a plan for you. You're going to develop your system or your style of wrestling that you can be successful at. So I think you guys really did it just right. And I think what you're telling the audience is something that they can really replicate. And then tracking the process with a single purposeful funnel point, a single champion or key person in that role. Like you said, too many cooks in the kitchen, that is a devastating thing. Everybody gets an equal vote on a vast scale does not often work. And so there does have to be delegation and assignment of responsibility. And you do that very well. I've watched you work. So let me ask you this. We have just a few minutes left on this segment. In your perception, you've been doing this for several years now. You've even gone through a recent merger where you've amplified what you do and how well you do it. Do you feel like your firm has reached its final destination in how it's going to serve and advise and execute its performance on clients, or is there going to be continued work involved along the way?
Oh my gosh, no, we haven't even scratched the surface. So that was just the start of how we wanted our firm to even begin. Excuse me, we implemented this model 3 years ago for the very basic, but then this kind of basically started over when we merged. So we are now starting from a beginning 3 to 5 year model just to get it where we want to be, kind of sitting comfortable. In order for us to continue growing beyond comfortability, it's going to take a minimum of 5 to 10 years. It is an ongoing process. The most exciting part is we came into this merger with another firm who was also utilizing a very, very similar model. We came from very similar backgrounds. And it was such a streamlined process of both of us coming together. And it only made our imaginations just go wilder, like more wild. If that's even a word. And we were able to take from there, since we scratched the service, we could bring more cooks into the kitchen. We could bring everybody else. We've already done the hard part and tried it, tested it. Now we can actually build it based on the trials that we have learned from it. So every day is something new, whether it's a client pointing something else out, whether it's an internal employee who has a better vision for something, we bring in the entire firm, not just leadership. And whether it's just kind of outside sources that have better ideas that we are constantly driving to build a better successful firm for us.
Gotcha. And Brittany, before we transition over to the break, give me kind of a quick answer so the audience can see the result. Your workload now from compared to workload 3 to 4 years ago at Tax Factory, what's the comparison?
At operations, I was working 60-hour weeks. I now work a 30, 35-hour week. And that's operations. Our tax people, maybe 40 hours.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's a rapid transition from leaning into technology, leaning into systems, putting the right people in the places, like you've said. And you guys have had a wonderful journey. So, Brittany, if somebody wants to find you, they want your brain from Accountability Services and says, this lady's a genius. How do they get a hold of you? How do they find you and get your assistance once they know that?
Yeah. So the best way to do it is go to our website, which is accountabilityservices.com. And my email is brittany.casarez@accountabilityservices.com. And you're going to test me on our actual phone number. And I believe it's 720-677-8750.
Excellent. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. You've been wonderful. We'll be seeing you again in the future. And everyone else, sit tight for the final segment of the evening. We'll be back with more riveting conversation on pivotal change. Welcome back to the final segment of the night on Pivotal Change. We've been having a wonderful episode talking about mentorship and growth and developing mindset, and then transitioning over into how to work through change and get all of those factors put into place in leading through a pivotal change moment in your life or career or business. And now we're going to end the night with, you've made these changes, you've got your mentorships in place, your programs are working. Now, how do you get yourself out there better? How do you get more leads? How do you get this wonderful system and enterprise you've built in front of more clients? So to have this discussion with me, I brought back Janel Sykora. She is the co-founder of Cajabra, and she is one of the most wonderful marketing experts I know. So we're going to have a conversation about all kinds of leads and leads management. So Janel, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm so excited to be here. Looking forward to this.
I'm looking forward to it as well, because you are the expert. So I'm going to let you largely take the reins. I know you've written some articles on this. You have a lot of content out there, and we've got about 10 minutes or so to get this. But about getting more leads, I want to know, how serious of a relationship is it when you ask somebody to partner up with you in services, and you're going out there and you're asking for them or getting this lead going from them?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, it kind of comes down to, first you have to decide, what kind of leads do I want? Do I want the transactional leads that aren't going to require any relationship? They don't care about the relationship. Most of the work that I do is with companies that care a lot about the relationship they have with the client. So I think the most important thing is to think about, what kind of leads do I want? And then, Ryan, I bet the day that you met your wife now, you did not march right up to her and ask her to marry you. Am I right?
Pretty close to that, but no, I did not.
What do you think she would have said if you literally met her, walked across the room and said, hey, will you marry me?
Yeah, she probably would have freaked out, thought I was some type of either stalker or just somebody that was not right in the head.
Exactly. Well, that is the same exact thing that happens when a business owner jumps the gun. And it's like asking someone to marry you without building up that relationship of trust and respect. People buy from people that they know and that they trust and that they respect. Know, like, and trust, essentially. And so when it comes to getting leads, which is one of the biggest questions, probably if not the biggest question I get most of the time, it's, you have to take a step back. First of all, you can't be in a time crunch where you say, I have to bring in this large amount of business in a very short window of time. You're not going to get good quality business that way. If you want good quality business, the first thing that you have to do is sit down and identify who your ideal client is. And I know that seems like, oh, I don't have time to do this. I already know who I'm selling to. It's so important to go through that exercise of, who is my ideal client? What are the problems that they're trying to solve? what is it? Get really deep inside their psyche and understand, what do they want? What does success look like to them? What are their problems? What's at stake if they don't do business with you? And really map out that messaging playbook around how you're going to present your product or your service to that client. That's the first thing that you have to do before you even think about getting.
I like that a lot. And I like developing the relationship. And I think that applies, we're an advisory-based accounting firm for one of the companies, and we're going to have a relationship. We need to develop it and continue to nurture that relationship. Some people are in some more transactional businesses, but they still need to brand themselves, have people trust the brand, trust the product, testimonials and things like that. So even if it's somebody you're never going to meet or talk to, there's still an opportunity to court the relationship, per se.
100%, 100%. And what I always tell people is, once you've identified your client, then you need to do a few other things. So then the next step would be, you need a good CRM. Now, some people think of a CRM in different ways. There are a lot of professional businesses, accounting firms as an example, that have a practice management system. That isn't necessarily a CRM. A CRM is something that you need in place in order to capture, nurture, and close leads. So you can have a system in place for managing a client, but you need a system in place for capturing those clients and working them through your funnel to the end. That's one thing. The other thing that you have to think about is your sales system and your marketing system. And they're two very different things. That's what I've spent my entire career doing. And sales is more, you're going outbound. You're going out and getting the business and bringing it in, right? Marketing is sort of a cross between art and science. What you're trying to do there is build up your trust capital, if you will, in order to drive leads into you. It's just a longer play. And you've got to have both systems in place, though, separately, tied together through a CRM. And the other thing that I tell people is the importance of having a multi-pronged strategy. So, for instance, marketing, as an example, you might have a couple of different channels that you're working through. I work with a firm that decided they just want to go all in on Facebook, literally Facebook. It's their niche. They go on, they post multiple times a day on Facebook. They do videos on Facebook. And then they've got some really good lead generators. And those lead generators, which are ebooks, guides, those types of things, when people download those, they're immediately getting a series of emails, texts, those types of things. So working multiple channels to be able to move leads through your funnel is important. But the other thing is, if you're in a type of business where you are a professional and an expert, you can't underestimate the power of content. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see professional firms make is, well, we tried this. We did it for, say, 6 months, sort of sporadically or intermittently. It didn't work. A good content marketing strategy will take anywhere from 8 to 24 months to be able to yield results. But once you build that engine, it just keeps rolling.
That's wonderful. So when people want to scale their bandwidth, they need to be patient. There's no magic easy button for, I need lots of not content, but I need lots of customers right now, because then you're going to plague yourself with the not right profile of the client. And then the other thing is, there's an avenue of patience and development. There's a quote that I heard from a highly successful person that says, the problem with today's society is the addiction to social media. The problem is that they are addicted to consuming social media when they should be addicted to producing content in social media in order to further themselves and further their brand. And I feel like you're pushing that message here, that we're in a content creation phase of the economy. And if you're not in that with people like you, you're falling behind.
100%. Social media is critical. Video is so important, because if you let people see you and hear you and experience what you're like, and they're engaging in a relationship with you, even if you don't know it. And they need to be able to see how you speak, what you say, to begin to be able to trust you. So you need to be creating content, but not just video content. Written content is very important. Blog content, because what that does is, A, it showcases your expertise, but B, if you write it correctly, the other thing that it does is it can help with SEO optimization of your website if you're really focused on optimizing certain keywords. So written content, in the form of social media, as well as blogs, also doing things like podcasts, webinars, and really, without feeling overwhelmed, the best thing to do is to think about, well, what are one or two content channels that I can really embrace and get behind? And then put together a simple Excel spreadsheet or Google sheet and map out what I like to call an editorial calendar for, okay, what can I handle from a cadence perspective? How often do I want to post? How often do I want to create content? And then start mapping out topics. Feels a whole lot less overwhelming when you've got really basic topics just mapped out for a couple of weeks, even a month.
Gotcha. And I'm really glad you entered into that last point right there because it all sounds very overwhelming as I've got a full-time job producing widgets or providing a service or creating and manufacturing something. How can I possibly squeeze the amount of content development and time into my schedule? But breaking it down into simple steps, a little roadmap, some timing, some cadence. So I always call that pacing on my side, but cadence is better because it's a musical term that actually makes sense. And so I think that's really important for people to understand. But what if literally they're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week just to keep up, pay the bills, and get a margin of profit? How can they introduce this? Would there be a way to do it with AI technology experts? What's the answer to that?
Yeah, and that happens a lot. You've got a lot of business owners out there who are working 60, 80 hours a week to get that business off the ground. In that case, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier that comes into play to really put some focus on. Focus on your CRM. Make sure that you've got a CRM in place that can automate everything for you and be able to invite and bring prospects into a conversation where they want to be. You don't want to have to be checking your social media direct messages, your text. And by the way, Gen Z loves text. So two-way texting is pretty non-negotiable at this point. But you need some sort of a vehicle where all of those conversations, including your email, can be funneled into one place so that you can be talking to people and engaging them in conversation as they come into your business. And along with that CRM, the technology is so amazing these days, but being able to put in place an opportunity for if you're a busy business owner and you're on another line with a client or you're out visiting with a client and someone calls and they want your attention, they're going to go to the next person on the list if they don't get an immediate response. So having a text back, like this called text back in my business, set up, and there's so many things that you can automate through a good CRM system. Having two-way texting set up in place, you can have web chat set up on Google as well as on your website to be able to invite prospects into the conversation. Once you are up and running and you've got your business going and you want to start to get more selective about your clients, which is what I see happen a lot of times when someone starts a business, they want anybody. They'll take any business that walks through the door, right? Then we start to get a little bit more selective because we're sort of running our faces off, if you will, and you get more selective. Then you can really hone your strategy and focus more on your content. I think the most important thing is automate your lead generation first.
So that is a great place for us to leave as a big nugget, a homework assignment is for our clients to sit here and say, hey, you need to make the selection process happen. You need to put this first step in place and you need to research a CRM if you're not already using one. So Janel, if people want to go to step 2 and 3 with you specifically, how can they get a hold of Janel and Cajabra? Where do we find you?
Yeah. So you can go to our website, which is www.cajabra.com. It's Cajabra. And up in the top right corner, there's a button that you can click and schedule some time directly with me just for a quick strategy session. There's no pressure, no obligation, anything like that, but you can connect with me there. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, just Janel Sykora. But yeah, I love doing those strategy sessions. They give me energy. It's just a lot of fun to meet new people and help them out in some way.
I love it. Janel, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. You've got a lot of insight, and our people are now taking notes on where to start. So I'm going to challenge everyone in the audience tonight. I want you to go out there and examine yourself, get those lists ready, because not only internally, but externally, you can see the change and then be the change. We'll see you guys next time on the TV show, Pivotal Change.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation.